Okay, who has a question? Back there, that gentleman?
I recently read that Balthazar Gaston had his wings clipped to a certain extent. He was admonished by other magistrates regarding this universal jurisdiction business. And I'd like somebody to explain exactly after 15 or 20 years of him doing things about Pinochet and other people, why suddenly some magistrates in Spain or somewhere else decided to restrict this universal jurisdiction to some extent.
Yeah, Marjorie?
Yeah, the reason that Balthazar Garzón has been suspended and had his wings clipped, as you say, is not because of the universal jurisdiction investigation that's going on. He's no longer in charge of that, but it's because he is committing the unpardonable crime of trying to investigate what happened during the Pinochet regime with the torture, the disappearances, the murders. And there are people that, especially right-wingers in the legislature in Spain, who don't want that to happen. So that's what's happened to him. But also, they have weakened their universal jurisdiction law in Spain, making it a little bit more difficult to bring foreign nationals to justice. Nevertheless, my understanding is that the investigation of the 6 Bush torture lawyers is proceeding.
Dan, did you have a question?
The audience, let me ask a question right now. How many people here reaching inside are students of both halls, or law students? 1, 2, 3,
There were several that left. There were several more that had to leave a little.
There were several that left, Dan.
Well, there is on, this question really for Marjorie, we're talking here about a rather wholesale, systematic overturning of the rule of law. Because we're not just talking about violating one law or one case or a handful of cases ad hoc. We had under you, YO, and Addington, and Bybee, and the administration in general, a theory that the president was really not bound by the rule of law in any way as commander-in-chief during a time of war in national security matters. That there was no constraint. The practices that they supposedly justified in that way, as a major challenge to the rule of law, have pretty much been continued by Obama. It hasn't been turned back to the rule of law. Now the question is, extended. Should we have expected some relatively elite institutions in the country, or people, to be rising up, not just the man in the street, woman in the street, but institutions to defend this wholesale overturning and attack on the whole rule of law? I would assume that as a layman here, I would think that would include law professors, not only at Bolt Hall, judges, associations of judges, associations of lawyers, scholars of various kinds, Congress certainly, and lawyers in Congress. So from there, a lot of lawyers in Congress. Question to Marjorie, how come we haven't seen any of that? Why is it just us in this audience, these kind of people who profess concern about the attack on the rule of law? Why don't these other people?
Well, it's not quite that bad, Dan. The American Bar Association has come out with a number of resolutions around the torture issue and surveillance. They've come out with some very, very good, strong statements. The National Lawyers Guild, I'm very proud to say, has been fighting this every step of the way. The Society of American Law Teachers, which I was just elected to the Board of Governors, is a progressive group of law professors, has taken positions all along the way. When law professors, there were law professors that had been writing and speaking out against this during the Bush administration, but there was one law professor who was actually a dean of one of the nation's premier law schools who remained silent on these issues for the most part, and that is our new Supreme Court Justice, Elena Kagan, which was a great disappointment to many of us. We'll see what she does now that she's on the court. But you're right, there has not been a groundswell of opposition to the seizure of power by the Bush administration, the imbalance in the 3 branches, giving so much power, almost unfettered power, to the executive, the way we would hope. And that is because there's so much fear in this country. There has been a tremendous attack on academic freedom, where professors, even tenured professors who espouse dissenting views have been targeted by the right wing, by the Federalist Society very systematically. People are very scared, they're very nervous. And what the Bush administration was very successful in doing was to create a tremendous climate of fear after 9/11, when Ashcroft, I think it was Ari Fleischer who said, be careful what you say, be careful what you do. And then John Ashcroft said, your actions will only harm terrorists if you speak out. And so that's what we're dealing with. And now that we have a Democratic administration with Obama, it's in some ways the contradictions are less clear, and so I think it's more difficult for people to see that what's happening is really illegal and objectionable because they're so intent on protecting against the radical right wing, the teabaggers, that we just don't see enough real principled criticism against what's happening in the Democratic administration.
Can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
So just to actually maybe introduce some constructive tension on the panel, I certainly agree that all of those organizations have taken those positions seeking accountability, but I think that whether it's SALT or the NLG or maybe less so the ABA, we're all relatively marginal, at least relative to the establishment. And I think part of the problem, in addition to the fear that Marjorie cited, is the fact that it's not just the Bush administration, it's not just the Obama administration, it is the entire ruling establishment. The same establishment that basically sold our country to Wall Street is the same establishment that is up to its neck in these abuses. Congress is complicit. Passing the Military Commissions Act was basically a violation of international law. There is no one in Washington, D.C. in a position of power who would remain unscathed were accountability to actually run to all the people who have a hand in this equation. And so I think the collective action dilemma in going to people who are actively complicit and seeking their solicitude as part of the problem. Is everyone familiar with Dawn Johnson and the saga with the confirmation, the lack of confirmation to Obama's first nominee to the Office of Legal Counsel that John Yoo made infamous? She was a very outspoken proponent of executive accountability when she was out of the administration. She used to be in OLC under the Clinton administration. She was Obama's first nominee to head OLC under this administration. She hung in the wind for a year before essentially withdrawing her nomination. And the issue that kept her from being confirmed was torture and executive accountability for it. So, and it was Congress that let her sit there. So unfortunately, in the establishment, we have very few allies on this. All the more reason, I think, that it'll take concerted grassroots action to create space.
What was her name again?
Dawn Johnson. Johnson with an E at the end.
One more small announcement, and make it very quick. Raymond Budelman has asked me if he could relay to you what he's doing, and it's quite impressive.
Hi everybody, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good. I am a member of Amnesty International here on campus. I am also a proud student at this law school. I'm going for my Master of Laws degree. And I, along with Amnesty International, have organized a petition to reform the federal torture prohibition to make it stronger. If I, as an individual, were to waterboard somebody, I would be prosecuted for assault, but I couldn't actually be prosecuted under federal law for committing an act of torture because there currently is no federal torture statute. Sorry, I'm out of breath. I randomly There currently is no federal torture statute that applies to acts committed within the United States, and no federal torture law that applies to the acts of individuals in private capacities. So if anybody ever does get prosecuted for committing acts of torture, it's either by state law or it's because they're a government official and they fall under one of the other various provisions, maybe the War Crimes Act or something like that. But we think the US government should be sending a message to the entire world that torture is absolutely and unequivocally not acceptable in any society. And we also believe that this university should be leading in trying to persuade Congress to reform the law, because we don't believe that the law stands for torture, and we don't believe that the law should stand for torture. And so we are gathering signatures from students, and we are going to send a letter to the UC Regents, the Chancellor, as well as Dean Edley. We would like the support of all students at Berkeley, and we would also like the support of everybody in this room. So I would urge you all to consider carefully signing our petition. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Marjorie, please.
Yeah, I want to thank you for that, Ray. That's really important work that you're doing, and I think that it bears noting that torture takes place every day in the United States, in the prisons, especially in the supermax prisons, with solitary confinement, cell extractions, stripping people naked, dragging them down the hall, and in fact, Lance Tapley, who's a journalist, wrote a chapter for my anthology, The United States and Torture, about torture in the United States. So I think that that's commendable to try to get Congress to amend the torture statute, which, you're correct, only punishes torture that takes place outside the United States. Thank you for that.